In the heart of a sun-scorched kingdom, where golden grasses stretch like oceans, and the wind carries whispers of wars long past, a lion was born, not to bring balance, but to break it. His birth did not signal hope. There were no omens of peace, no signs of prophecy, only silence and the scent of blood from a nearby carcass, as if the land itself knew that this cub would grow to stain the soil with dominance. He was born under a dying tree, on the edge of the Kanika Pride's domain, one-eyed borderland where predators often vanished, and hyenas cackled at dusk like broken ghosts. His mother was fierce but aging, a lioness who had survived too many seasons and bore the wounds of battles she never asked for. His father? Unknown. Some said he was a rogue. Others said he was a passing tyrant. Most agreed he never stayed long, enough to teach his son anything but absence. From the beginning, the cub was different. He didn't play like the others. He didn't chase shadows or beg for milk. He watched, quietly, relentlessly, as if every moment he spent still was a calculation. The other cubs avoided him. Even the older lions eyed him with suspicion. He learned to hunt not by being taught, but by watching kills unfold, tracking the moment the life left the eyes of prey, memorizing the crack of bones, the angle of a fatal bite. His play fights became real too quickly. Other cubs limped away. Some didn't return. They named him Tao, but behind that name the lionesses whispered something else. The eyes that do not blink. Tao didn't grow into strength. He grew into command. By the time he was a sub-adult, he had already challenged. A cousin twice his size and won. There was no ceremony, no rite of passage. Tao simply took what others waited to be granted. Respect was not earned, it was enforced. He did not lead, he occupied. He did not share, he took. The elders began to worry. Not because he broke rules, rules meant nothing in the wild, but because he didn't fear anything, not even them. And in a kingdom where fear keeps the savannah in order, a lion who knows no fear becomes something far more dangerous than a predator. He becomes a storm. Tao's exile did not begin with a roar, but with silence. When he and his brother Banda turned 3, their time in the Kanika Pride came to an abrupt end. Their own fathers, now viewing them as threats, drove them out under the law of the wild. No two kings can share a throne. The clash was brief, but brutal. Tao didn't fight back, not because he was afraid, but because he had no interest in dying for a pride he no longer respected. He left with Banda, his only loyal blood, vanishing into the salt-powdered winds of the east. The 2 young males entered the savage university of the nomad, sleepless nights, empty bellies, constant risk. They scavenged from vultures, stole from hyenas, and drank from puddles that reeked of decay. Every day was a new exam in pain. Every failure cost flesh. But Tao adapted. He never mourned the loss of privilege. Hunger didn't humble him, it honed him. Banda was more hesitant, more compassionate, still tethered to the code of their birth pride. But Tao had shed that code like a snake's skin. For him, power was the only law. And then they began to fight, not just for survival, but for dominance. Tao led attacks on lone lions, ambushed injured males, and baited rival coalitions. Some were killed, some fled, some knelt, but every conquest deepened the shadow of his legend. It was during a dry season, when the riverbeds cracked and prey migrated north, that Tao and Banda found what would become the beginning of their empire. 3 lone females from the fractured Zula pride. The lionesses were cautious at first. Tao didn't court them. He didn't follow the rituals of flirtation. He simply killed a rogue that had been harassing their cubs and stood guard by the carcass for 2 days without eating, as if to say, "This is mine. And now, so are you." The lionesses accepted his claim, not with affection, but with submission. Fear can be loyalty's cruel cousin. With a pride, Tao became something else entirely. He wasn't a nomad anymore. He was a monarch and a warlord. He began expanding his reach through coordinated violence, claiming water points, clearing out young males, and disrupting mating cycles in nearby prides. Coalitions that once laughed at the Kanika exiles now avoided the region altogether. Guides and trackers in the area started referring to Tao not by name, but as the Black Shadow. His mane had darkened, thick and untamed, matching the stories that followed him. Cubs were vanishing. Lone males disappeared without trace. Even hyenas gave wide circles to his patrols. If you're enjoying the story, hit the like button and leave a comment sharing what has impressed you the most so far. Your support helps this content reach more people who love wildlife. And yet Tao didn't rage for the sake of rage. Every kill was precise, every takeover calculated. He didn't move out of hunger or desperation. He moved with strategy, like a ghost general laying claim to a kingdom one roar at a time. What made Tao different wasn't his strength. It was his ability to turn survival into a doctrine and dominance into a religion. And in Banda, he had not just a brother, but a soldier. Quieter, more thoughtful, but no less lethal when Tao gave the command. They weren't a coalition, they were a conquest. For nearly 2 years, no lion challenged the lands between the riverbed of the south and the hills of the eastern Savannah. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Tao and Banda ruled like shadows, present everywhere, seen only when they wanted to be. Their patrols were silent, their ambushes were flawless. They didn't need to roar to be heard. The silence they carried was heavier than sound. It carried weight in the wind. Under their rule, the pride grew. Cubs were born, borders expanded, and yet no affection ever seemed to dwell in Tao's eyes. He did not play with the young. He did not rest beside the lionesses. He watched from a distance as though guarding a fortress rather than raising a family. Banda, though quieter, had earned respect for his unmatched skill in the hunt. He rarely failed. His patience could outlast that of leopards. He was the tactician. Tao was the iron. Together they operated like a living engine of power, grinding opposition into the dust. They crushed an uprising from a trio of desperate males who tried to challenge their eastern flank. The attackers never even reached the pride's heartland. They were intercepted at the perimeter and left as carrion for jackals. Their bodies arranged, some said, like a warning. No one claimed to see Tao make the kills. But somehow, everyone knew he had. His mane now bore scars, one ear partially torn. His face had hardened into an expression that never changed. Even in peace, he looked ready for war. Locals began to speak of him with reverence, not love, not admiration, but the kind of fear that borders on spiritual awe. The guides whispered stories to tourists of a lion whose very scent made antelope freeze, a lion that hunted hyenas not for food but for discipline, a lion that didn't roar because the savannah roared for him. But all reigns, no matter how complete, are borrowed. And deep within the pride, unseen to even Tao himself, the seeds of his undoing had already begun to take root. The cubs grew. Older, the lionesses began to murmur. Banda, once fully obedient, started to question some of Tao's choices, especially his habit of expanding too far, stretching their control beyond what 2 males could safely maintain. The territory was large, yes, but so was the price of holding it. Fresh coalitions from the north, younger and more agile, began scouting the outer edges. Tao didn't flinch. He welcomed the tension. Conflict was familiar, predictable, but he had forgotten the oldest lesson of the wild. A lion is never stronger than the silence between his wars. The first true crack did not come from an enemy. It came from time. Tao had never shown weakness, not in battle, not in injury, not in hunger, but even King's age. The dust that once rose in triumph behind his steps began to settle into his joints. His strides, though still purposeful, lost their edge. His wounds began to take longer to close. The mane, once thick and black as thunderclouds, now bore streaks of wear, a battle flag left too long in the wind. Still, Tao pressed forward. He had known only one way to exist: advance, dominate, suppress. Rest was never part of the doctrine. Weakness, a word for the forgotten. It was Banda who saw the shift first. The borderlands they had claimed began to require more defense than the two brothers could offer. Banda wanted to pull back, tighten their circle, fortify the core. But Tao refused. He had built an empire through sheer force. Retreat, even tactical, was unthinkable. Pride is the final predator in the savannah. Then came the northern males. They weren't legends yet, just a group of three, lean, coordinated, with a scent of fresh ambition. Scouts had spotted them circling at a distance, leaving messages on trees and grass, claw marks that dripped challenge. Banda warned him. They were young, and they were watching. Tao didn't answer. He didn't need to. His whole body was the response. We do not yield. The attack came just after the rains, when the grasses were high and the prey scattered deep. The pride had just fed. The lionesses were exhausted. The cubs were growing restless. Banda was out patrolling the southern trail. Tao stood alone when the wind shifted. They came from three sides like hyenas, but fought like lions. The Northern Coalition didn't test him first. They lunged. Tao held his ground with terrifying calm. He fought like a lion with nothing to prove, and that's what made him dangerous. One attacker lost a chunk of flesh before retreating, yowling into the brush. But numbers mattered. Precision faded with fatigue. They wore him down piece by piece, bite by bite. Banda returned too late. The invaders had already driven Tao back far from the cubs, deep into the acacia scrub. He was still breathing, but only just. Banda stood over his brother, growling, daring them to come closer. They didn't. For them, it wasn't about finishing Tao. He had already fallen. The crown wasn't stolen. It was dropped. That night, Tao did not speak. He didn't. Limp didn't groan. He only stared at the stars, unblinking, as if reading something written in fire across the sky. Banda lay beside him, neither mourning nor comforting, just being. The next morning, Tao was gone. Some say he wandered into the salt pans to die alone. Others say Banda buried him beneath the sand, where the flies wouldn't come. A few even whisper that Tao still roams in the distance, unseen, unchallenged, too proud to die where he had ruled. But the truth is simpler. A king who never bowed, never learned how to fall. And when he did, he fell like a mountain, quiet, massive, and forever missed. After Tao vanished, the savannah didn't roar. It hushed. The silence left in his absence was not peace. It was void. The new coalition took the territory quickly, roaring louder than necessary, marking trees in thick trails, flaunting their youth like banners. But something in the land felt changed. The lionesses obeyed, but their eyes lingered longer on the horizon at dusk. The cubs played, but without the shadows of giants to mimic. Banda remained for a time, pacing along the old paths, silent and lean, the last pillar of a collapsed temple. He did not challenge the new rulers. He did not flee either. He simply stayed, not to protect what had been lost, but to remember it. Over time, stories began to sprout like thorn bushes after rain. Stories of a lion who fought wars without allies, of a beast whose eyes could freeze, buffalo, of a king who taught fear how to kneel. Trackers, guides, and rangers spoke his name softly, not as a fact, but as folklore. Some said Tao had left behind cubs, that his blood ran through quiet males in distant prides. Others claimed to hear his growl at night near the old waterholes. A ranger once found a carcass torn open in a pattern no young lion could achieve, as if Tao had returned to remind them whose land this truly was. But nature forgets even kings. Grass regrows, bones turn to dust, the sun rises on new roars. Yet, the legend endures, because Tao was not just a lion. He was a rupture, a living rebellion against mercy, against caution, against the myth that kings must be noble. He ruled not with love, but with inevitability. He was not the lion you admire. He was the one you remember. And in a land where memory is etched in claw marks and shadow, that is the closest thing to eternity a lion can earn.